This is London.
Hi, and welcome to RetroVision. Don't know why I'm doing that. The first documentary is a film I made for Discovery Wings back in 2003. Now, if you haven't heard of Discovery Wings, it was a niche aviation channel, part of the Discovery network. I'd made a whole series on various aircraft, and two of these were the Avro Vulcan and the Hanley Page Victor. These two fantastic aircraft were a key part of Britain's strategic nuclear deterrent in the 50s and 1960s. And they were amazingly futuristic things, looking like they were straight out of Thunderbirds or something. Incredibly photogenic. Both planes were big favourites of mine from air shows I went to as a kid, so they were great projects to work on. Thinking back, the filming kit we used then was retro tech. Betacam SP was the format in the 90s, which was a huge heavy camera connected by a thick umbilical cable to a huge heavy recorder. So really cumbersome. I'm sure the osteopaths and chiropractors of those days were doing very good business. Mine certainly was. Still not right, actually. The other thing that was very different about filming back then was the incredible access we got. The kind of access that just wouldn't be possible now in today's health and safety first culture. There were occasions when we were standing right in the middle of the runway, albeit at the end, but in the middle of the runway, looking down the center line with a Victor or a Vulcan bomber thundering towards us and then just lifting off just in front of the camera, which may explain why my hair looks like this. The documentary you're about to see is called Vulcans, Victors and Cuba, and concentrates on the activities of the RAF's V-Force, the Strategic Nuclear Deterrent, during the very scary days of the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. This was a very momentous month, by the way. It's also when the first James Bond film came out, and on that very same day, the first Beatles single was released. And as I record this rather weirdly, the last Beatles single is rocketing up the charts. It's sobering to think that had the nuclear deterrent not worked in October 1962, that first Beatles single would have also been the last. Vulcans, Victors and Cuba is a 70-minute film, so I've divided it up into 7 10-minute more easily digestible parts. So here's the first one. Oh, and by the way, you know what to do. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe.
October the 15th, 1962. The first day in a 2-week crisis that brought the world closer than it has ever been to all-out nuclear war. This was the day that US reconnaissance photographs revealed Russian medium-range missile sites in Cuba. If these installations were operational, nearly every city in America would be within range of Soviet nuclear attack. President Kennedy and his military advisors agonized over the best course of action. With US forces ready to invade the island, superpower tension reached an all-time high. In Britain, the V-Force nuclear deterrent's well-practiced procedures were swinging into action. Bomber bases were sealed off by armed patrols and put on maximum alert. Hydrogen bombs were transported to the RAF stations from the top-secret storage facility at Faldingworth, north of Lincoln. As the crisis deepened, the Vulcan, Victor and Valiant V bombers were armed and stood combat-ready. Just over 1,000 miles to the east, Soviet medium and intermediate ballistic missiles were being prepared for launch. Reaching a speed of Mach 4, these missiles could strike V bomber bases in as little as 15 minutes. Britain's early warning radar would have detected an attack a mere 4 minutes before UK targets would have been hit. To increase their chances of being far enough away from the nuclear blast to survive, V-bombers were equipped with a mass rapid startup facility where all 4 engines and electrical avionics would come to life almost instantly by pressing a single button in the cockpit. This allowed a scramble takeoff in just under 2 minutes. By Friday, October the 26th, 1962, aircrew were camped in caravans next to their aircraft, poised for the alert klaxon. In 1945, the new Labour Prime Minister Clement Attlee knew full well that the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki had changed the world. Within weeks of the attack, Attlee had concluded that in the face of such awesome destructive power, the provision of air raid precautions and shelters would be futile. The answer, he felt, to an atomic bomb dropped on London would be dropping an atomic bomb on the enemy's greatest city. How Britain was going to acquire the means to retaliate was another question there. In the aftermath of World War II, the country's economy was stretched to the limits. On top of this, less than a year later, the US Congress passed the McMahon Act. This forbade the disclosure of nuclear information to any foreign power. Even former A-bomb collaborators, Britain and Canada, were denied access. If Britain was to have defensive atomic weapons, it was clear it would have to design, test and build them on its own.
I think it was important that we had our own independent deterrent. We were well aware that Russia was just over the horizon. Stalin was still there, and his avowed intent was, in fact, to spread communism.
By January 1947, Attlee authorized the manufacture of a British bomb. Without America's industrial know-how, this was going to be a costly and difficult process. Added to this would be the expense of developing a whole new generation of jet bombers needed to deliver the British weapon. Whilst the RAF had squadrons of advanced fighters, larger jet aircraft were still years away. Undaunted, the Air Ministry drew up the specifications for a strategic jet bomber. It called for a fast, high-altitude medium bomber for the purpose of long-range conventional and nuclear strikes. Three separate British aircraft manufacturers, Vickers Armstrong, A.V. Rowe and Handley Page, undertook the task of designing and building aircraft that would meet these requirements. The result would be aircraft that would set new standards in aviation design, manufacture, and performance. The V-bombers. The first V-bomber to be completed was the Vickers Valiant. A comparatively simple design, the development process of this aeroplane had been very rapid. It bridged the gap between old piston-powered technology and the more revolutionary schemes that Avro and Handley Page were working on. At the time, this suited the defense planners very well, as the first British atom bomb was now well on the way. The Vickers design team had developed a long-range bomber which incorporated advanced design features, including power-assisted flight controls and swept-back wings mounted on the shoulder of the fuselage, allowing room for a sizable bomb bay. With its maximum ceiling of 54,000 feet and high speed of 554 miles per hour, no defensive armament was considered necessary. The Valiant made its maiden flight in 1951 and became the RAF's first nuclear bomber when Britain's A-bombs were brought into service 4 years later. These A-bombs, codenamed Blue Danube, were delivered to RAF Wittering in component form. There then followed a series of operational trials to perfect the radar, navigational and bombing equipment. Then, in the autumn of 1956, No. 49 Squadron were deployed to Australia to participate in the first live drop trials of the bomb. Britain properly entered the atomic age on the 21st of October 1956. On this day at 15:27 local time, a Valiant V bomber and a live Blue Danube A-bomb were combined for the first time. The weapon, dropped from 30,000 feet, detonated perfectly, just missing the aiming point by a mere 110 yards. The system was proved, and the Valiant squadrons could now go ahead shaping V-Force operational procedures. Following a similar policy to that of America's Strategic Air Command, all crews selected for service with the V-Force were to be veterans. Aircraft captains had to have a minimum of 1,750 hours, and co-pilots at least 700. By the end of 1956, Bomber Command had a medium bomber force of 6 squadrons and a further one operating in a strategic reconnaissance role.
Our world status was definitely raised. America had the bomb, we had the bomb. Russia had the bomb, and that was really it at the time. So it meant we were a big player in the world.